We're back. The first post-game show of 2025. And Nick, it's a winning edition. I don't have a beer to crack open like Trace normally does, but hopefully you'll forgive me. Welcome in, everybody. If you're just joining us, Reds beat the Guardians in the first spring training game of 2025, 6-3. Ongoing still in Maryville, the Reds leading the Brewers 7-5 in the top of the ninth in a split squad classic. Nick, how we doing this Saturday afternoon?
Doing good. Great to see Reds baseball back. You have the first inning, you have Hunter Greene give up a couple runs, and you're like, you know what? This is just spring training, no big deal. Then Elly De La Cruz hits a home run, and you're like, all right, yep, we're back. This is it. We're excited. Here we go. So yeah, you gotta love spring training. Weird today with two games right off the jump. Not sure how to kind of react to that. Tried to do my best to follow both as they went along, but looking good for the good guys.
Yeah, the bats were out today. The ball was jumping. Let me tell you that. Look, I think the lack of real StatCast data, real time, at least on the broadcast, was throwing me off because they said that first Elly De La Cruz home run was like a 77 exit velo, and I was like, I'm not so sure about that. But the ball was flying, jumping off the bat, and like you said, good to see the good guys coming out on top, at least in this first game against the Guardians. We'll dive into all the details as we always do, but first we want to make sure we acknowledge our title sponsor, Deep South Commodities.
Yeah, as always, Chatterbox Reds proudly sponsored by Deep South Commodities. DSC is a leader in renewable commodities for biofuel production, specializing in used cooking oil collection, aggregation, and sales. Visit www.deepsouthcommodities.com for more information. Thanks as always to our friends at DSC.
All right, Nick, let's jump right into it. Talk about exactly what we were just talking about. Elly De La Cruz, a 2-2 curveball in the bottom of the first, hits it a mile, 450 feet, 106.1 exit velo, according to the updated StatCast data. Good to see Elly back on the field, isn't it?
Yeah, 450 feet. Yeah, look, you obviously don't want to make too much of spring training as we, you could say that with every caveat there is, but the one thing with Elly De La Cruz's game that you feel like, other than his defense, that could take the biggest leap in 2025 would be more power. Because like, what did he hit? 24 home runs last year. Felt like he hit the whatever the 24 home runs, like just rolling out of bed. It feels like there's a lot more there. It feels like he could get up into the mid 30s, maybe 40. Like, that doesn't feel crazy with the guy with the insane power that he has. So it'll be interesting to see if he's able to kind of tap into a little bit more of the power, so far. The great thing was, seeing him hit a home run off of a lefty. And this isn't just any lefty. This is a lefty that was pretty highly regarded by the Guardians, and Logan Allen is currently trying to fight for a roster spot. So yeah, I mean, look, he's trying to figure it out just like everyone else, but he's in a much different spot than a guy like Hunter Greene that's just, as he said after the game, just trying to go out there and throw strikes. He's trying to prove it. So, Elly hitting a home run off a lefty, that's great to see. And it'll be interesting to see what is home run total. What do you think, Craig? What do you think his home run total would be for 2025?
I don't know if I'll give him to 40. I think, that might be a bit of a stretch for me personally, but I wouldn't be shocked to see him extended up into the low 30s this year. I don't know. We talked about it in a show a couple of weeks ago about how he's got kind of a new stance this year. Our friend Charlie Goldsmith put it out there that they're kind of coining this term controlled aggression. And, we talked a lot about Elly De La Cruz and his apparent guessing at the plate last year. He was fooled by pitches that probably shouldn't have fooled him. He was, late on pitches that he probably shouldn't have been late on, and wasn't really trusting himself, I think, at the plate. And so it was really good to see him come up there. That first one against a curveball, sits back, hits it 450 feet. And then again, the second one, Logan Allen, you mentioned, really good to see him come out and really show us that new controlled aggression. And if he can sit back and really trust his hands, which are some of the fastest in baseball, there's no doubt that he could be well into the 30s in terms of home runs at the end of this year. And he's certainly going to give Cincinnati fans a lot of excitement throughout the course of the year. And didn't get to see a whole lot defensively out of him, but offensively, really good to see.
So someone was asking me what the best prop would be for the Reds. Elly De La Cruz over 23.5 at -104 right now. I don't know. I might have to go hammer that, Craig.
Knowing you might have to take an alt line and increase it a little bit, get some better odds.
It's kind of crazy. So, not to go full gambling here, but 23.5 is -104, but 30 is like only plus 158. It's like I don't feel like I'm getting that much. Yeah,
no, that doesn't make any sense at all.
That's a 6 home runs is a pretty big leap. So yeah, I would just take the almost even money on the 24. Hell, he might have that by the All-Star break.
Watch yourself. Watch yourself.
It's like the All-Star break's like 90 games now, so it's a little different.
That's true. Elly De La Cruz, not the only Red making a splash in his debut here in 2025. Newest Red, or maybe not the newest Red, but new Red Gavin Lux, also out to a strong start. He goes 2 for 3 with 3 RBIs in the game against the Brewers. That game, again, if you're just tuning in the bottom of the 9th now, Reds lead 7-5. We'll let you know as soon as that one goes final. But Nick, good to see Gavin Lux stepping right in and showing offensively what he can do.
Yeah, Lux hitting second in the game managed by Terry Francona. I respect Terry Francona, not wanting to have the hug fest, as he said, by going to the game that was on TV. But I wanted to see Terry Francona in a Reds uniform. Like, that was kind of I felt cheated a little bit on that.
Wouldn't this be the game that you do the hug fest in, though? Like, I get it's the first game of the year, but
he's gonna get it both.
Better now than to do it in Cleveland, right?
He's gonna get the same hug fest again, whether he did it now or later. But no, look, Gavin Lux, it makes sense that they're starting him off playing second base. I would assume probably his first couple, if I'm guessing, games will be at second base, kind of ease him into a Reds uniform at a comfortable position, and then try him out a little bit more at third. We'll talk about Candelario at third coming up, because that's maybe the biggest thing I'm really watching right now. But yeah, I mean, we don't have any data on Lux. We got a little social media clip of Lux's double. Looks like he hit it well, but I don't really have a good estimate. No StatCast data. I think Jeff Levering on the Brewers broadcast said, "Hey, he hit it well." So good for Gavin Lux. Good to see that. I want to see a little bit more of him. Please start him in the games that are on TV. The few that we have.
Yeah, the magic of editing and of framing. We have no idea really how hard that ball was hit. For all we know, it's a little blooper that just happened to find the gap or something. But shout out to Gavin Lux. I think there was an article on Reds.com this week about how he's kind of carrying 3 different gloves with him right now during spring training, because he's potentially playing so many different positions. First, other infield positions, and then obviously the outfield, and gets his start today at second base. Look, I think that understandably, Gavin Lux is kind of expected to take a little bit of a backseat. I know you've talked about the fact that he's going to start most games against right-handed pitching, but I think there's a lot of people who are kind of underestimating what his role is going to be on this team. We talked a lot about Santiago Espinal last year and him kind of being the first guy off the bench in the infield. Gavin Lux being your first guy off the bench in the infield versus a guy like Santiago Espinal, who was great for the Reds last year, but doesn't bring a whole lot of pop, doesn't bring a whole lot of excitement. Gavin Lux can kind of bring that for you, and he showed it today with 3 RBIs.
Well, not to bury the lead, but Santiago Espinal showed the pop today, Craig.
We'll get into that.
No. Yeah, no. Your point stands, and I think Gavin Lux will be in the lineup every day against right-handed pitching. I think that other guys will get benched before Gavin Lux. But yeah, I mean, look, Gavin Lux was the number 2 overall prospect in the sport. He's like a week older than Spencer Steer. I mean, that's where he's at. He still has a lot of room to grow. And again, we said it all off season, but I mean, he was legitimately one of the best hitters in the second half last year. Now that was coming back from an injury, a massive injury that cost him the entire 2023. So I don't think it's reasonable at all to expect Gavin Lux to perform that well. But I also don't think you should put any stock in his overall numbers because the first 2 months were so bad. So it'll probably be somewhere in the middle. I expect Gavin Lux will probably be a 115, 120 WRC plus overall. If he's used right, if he doesn't end up getting a ton of at-bats against lefties, then that number could plummet quite a bit. But against righties, I think the ceiling's very high for Lux. I think he could be a guy that has almost that, I'm scared to say this, that Will Benson type season in 2023 were just obliterated right-handed pitching. And those type of numbers.
Sure. If we can get 2023 Will Benson, I think most people would probably take that in the end. I don't know that that's like super exciting, but again, I think one of the things that's forgotten sometimes is that the Reds gave up basically nothing for Gavin Lux. So I know that what?
I think it's more than nothing. I think that
a comp pick in a single A guy.
The comp pick is very valuable. I mean, that's nothing to scoff about. I think it was a good trade by the Reds. I think it was a good gamble by the Reds, but I don't like that it was nothing. I think you're downplaying the significance of, Mike Sirota. That was your third round pick. And then the comp picks after the first round. I mean, that's a pretty big deal. Like, there's a reason the Dodgers make that deal, because the Dodgers will collect all of that up. And that's why the Dodgers are a machine. Everyone talks about the Dodgers spending, but the fact that they hoard prospects and capitalize on teams like the Reds that can't afford to go buy players, it's valuable to the Dodgers. So I don't like that they give up nothing for him. I think it was a good gamble for sure. But yeah, I'm really excited to see what Lux can do, and I'm interested. His power is the one wild card, because if Gavin Lux hits 10 home runs this year at the end of the year, I don't think I would be all that shocked. If Gavin Lux got into the 20s, I wouldn't really be shocked either. There's a real high variance, in my opinion, in how many home runs he can hit in a ballpark like Great American Ballpark.
Fair. Well, yesterday we saw on Instagram, Hunter Greene posted a reel or whatever, a bunch of photos, and in one of them, kind of showcased his 2025 goals. For those of you that didn't see it, Hunter Greene, 180 plus innings, sub-3 ERA, 200 plus strikeouts, all-star, and the bottom one, which was underlined, first Cy Young. First is important there. First of many, hopefully. Hunter Greene today, Nick, gave up obviously the 2 runs, 4 hits in 2 innings. I think we probably share sentiment here, but probably not going to read too much into the first outing of spring training for Hunter Greene, right?
Yeah, I mean, he said after he just wanted to throw strikes, which is typically the line that I think any veteran pitcher would say. Did get 8 swing and misses, which is notable. That's quite a few swing and misses. So his stuff was on at times. I mean, he just threw a couple pitches right down the middle of the plate. And shout out to Brian Rocchio, postseason legend. He had a great day for the Guardians, 3 for 3. Was ready to hit it. So I have all the confidence in the world in Hunter Greene. The only thing that's important the next 3-4 weeks with Hunter Greene is stay healthy. That's it.
Yeah, and he talked about it. I mean, he was really working on secondary pitches today, trying to throw him for strikes, making sure that he was, on his point and hidden spots. End of the day, threw 10 fastballs, 7 sliders, 3 splitters, and 1 curveball, 21 total pitches for Hunter Greene. I know it's early, but you see the post and his kind of goals for the season. What are your expectations and or goals for Hunter Greene in 2025?
Cy Young votes. I don't think he has to finish as high, but I would say that you kind of have expectations that he'll get Cy Young votes. That would probably be where I would, whatever that equals out to.
All right. Well, Hunter Greene obviously going to play an important part in the Reds for 2025. But 2 guys that, Nick, I know you're really high on their value for the Reds in 2025 also gave us their debuts for spring training, and that's Matt McLain and Christian Encarnacion Strand.
Yeah, both guys hit a couple balls really hard. The Reds had a lot of really hard hit balls in the game against the Guardians. McLain didn't have anything to show for it. CES did have a nice single back up the middle, but man, it's just been so long since we've seen Matt McLain in a uniform, in a Reds uniform. I mean, we saw him a couple games last spring, but before that, it was August 2023. So just great to see him back, man. You just hope that he can, stay healthy this year. I feel like we're putting way too much pressure on Matt McLain to perform at a high level. I believe in Matt McLain. I think he will have a good year. I think if he is 75% as good as he was in 2023, I think I would take that right now. So yeah, I mean, the most important thing for him is stay healthy. And then I have all the confidence in the world in CES. Saw him the other day, hit a nuke off Nick Lodolo. So I can't wait to see CES, get a full season. I believe he'll be on the opening day roster. I believe he'll be in the opening day lineup. And I think he is as big of a key as just about anything to this Reds team this year.
Yeah, Matt McLain 0 for 2 in the leadoff spot today. CES 1 for 2 to get a hit, batting 7th and playing first. Matt McLain obviously playing second.
What'd you think of the lineup today? That was kind of an interesting.
Well, I know I meant to bring it up when we were talking about Elly at the beginning, and then I completely forgot because I'm a terrible host.
You're not a terrible host. The idiot that put the script in there didn't put lineup in there. So
yeah, well, this is what I get for not doing my own script. Now, I thought it was interesting. I mean, I tweeted out before the game. I mean, Elly De La Cruz in the 3-hole. It's one of those things where, like, when you're looking at it on paper and you look at the power that he has and the ability to produce runs, it kind of makes sense. Tyler Stevenson batting in the 2-hole doesn't make a ton of sense to me. So, there's some flip-flopping that I would definitely expect. But I think the thing that's, like, interesting to talk about is ultimately Elly De La Cruz and maximizing his potential in 2025, and where that is in the lineup does actually play into it a little bit. I have a former colleague that I follow on social that tweeted out the plate appearances per batting position in 2024 for the Cincinnati Reds. And I know you're an advocate for Elly batting leadoff. He batted second most of the year last year. So batting leadoff for the Reds in 2024 resulted in 738 plate appearances. Batting third resulted in 703. So you're losing out on 35 potential plate appearances from Elly De La Cruz in 2025 if you do decide to bat him third. The jump from first to second isn't huge, 738 down to 723, but then you lose another 20 between second and third. So definitely interesting. I don't know how to look. We talked about this in text message. I don't know what to read into it, right? Like, it's the first spring training game. Do I care? I don't know. Like, is this Terry Francona trying things out and maybe that's where it's going to land? I don't know. Where do you sit with it?
I don't know. I need to look up the Guardians 2022 spring training first game lineup and see if that correlated to the or 2023. He was still the manager in 2023. Yeah, I mean, I would think that it has some significance. I mean, if you have Matt McLain, Tyler Stevenson, and Elly De La Cruz in a lineup, you would think there's something with that. Maybe not as much with Tyler Stevenson because there's other guys, that could be put up in that spot. I'm 100% team Elly De La Cruz bat leadoff. I don't want to see Elly De La Cruz getting any less at bats. And if he's not batting leadoff, he needs to bat second. That every analytical thing says that your best hitter should bat second. Some would argue first. There's nothing that says third or beyond, because you're not getting them enough at bats. And especially now that there's a DH, you don't have like the pitcher batting ninth. So you have guys that you could theoretically put in the 9 spot. Like when Santiago Espinal plays, he can bat at ninth and he's a pretty decent on base guy. So you have like another leadoff hitter the second time through, whether he's first or second, to be ahead of him. So yeah, I don't like that at all. I'm going to trust Tito. I'm certainly not going to coming guns a-blazing on Tito on February 20th, Francona on February 22nd, but I would definitely like to see Elly at least second in the lineup. I think you should be first.
It's spring training for all of us, Nick. For those of you that didn't watch, we'll go through it real quick. Matt McLain hit leadoff. He was playing second. Tyler Stevenson, Cotton hit second. De La Cruz third. Austin Hayes, cleanup. Candelario fifth. Steer sixth. CES was seventh. Fairchild eight, and Will Benson was 9. In Milwaukee, Friedel led off, then Lux, Trevino, Jake Fraley in the cleanup spot in Milwaukee, Espinal, Marte, Hines, Hurtubise, and Bowman rounded out that lineup. Bowman playing first. And real quick, Nick, I don't know if you saw in the chat or not, but final from Maryville, Alan Buznitz give up a 3-run home run in the bottom of the 9th to Vinny Capra. And Vinny Capra's second home run of the day gives the Brewers an 8-7 win over your Cincinnati Reds. Let's take a break and make sure that we acknowledge our partner Game Time. Of course, if you're looking for tickets, Game Time app is the only app to beat.
988.
You wrote Game Time. You specifically wrote Game Time. Listen,
Game Time is
script
not
writer.
Currently a sponsor. Shout out Game Time if you would like to come back. Oh boy, we're off the rails.
Spring training all around, ladies and gentlemen.
But if you had Reds money line in the Brewers game, you may want to be reminded that you can call or text 988 anytime, day or night. The 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is a place to get support for anything related to mental health, whether it's an immediate crisis, simply wanting to find out how to connect with care, or anything in between. It's a 100% confidential, secure, and anonymous way to reach out for help when you don't know where else to turn. To connect, call or text 988 or visit mantherapy.org to get help. It's okay not to be okay.
Anything else in the rundown that I should?
I don't know.
Have double checked it beforehand. We've only done 100 shows and had 988 in them the entire time this off season, and yet here I am, trusting my script writer. Just call me. It's just like the anchor man. If you put it on the script, apparently I'm going to read it. So, shout out to me for my lack of awareness and acumen as it pertains to identifying clear errors by Nick. Look, Nick, one of the storylines, obviously, for spring training this year is the competition at third base. Noelvi Marte started in Maryville against the Brewers at third base. And Jamer Candelario gets the start in Goodyear against the Guardians. Jamer looked slimmed down, looked pretty good today. What'd you think?
Yeah, I made a really nice play. Ranging to his right, kind of made a throw like sort of on the run. It was a long throw to first base, accurate. And then CES on the other end made a nice scoop to secure the out. So feels like that's the best spot for both of those guys. Feels like CES would be better at first base than third base. Well, I've heard a lot of encouraging reports about CES at third base, which I've heard multiple people tell me that CES is a much better third baseman than you would think. And it doesn't really compute with me based on what I've watched, but you know, the people that I really trust have been high on him. So we'll see on that. But yeah, look, if Candelario can play third base like he played before he put on a Cincinnati Reds uniform, that solves all your problems, because he was a perfectly adequate, slightly above average by some metrics third baseman up until last year when he just absolutely fell off a cliff. So if he can play third base, that's the solution. You don't really need to go anywhere else. It'd be nice to get Gavin Lux some reps at third base. It'd be nice to get CES some reps at third base, just to give you some more options in case Candelario gets hurt, because unfortunately that was quite a big part of the Jamer Candelario picture last year, was he got hurt often. I mean, it was kind of one thing after the other. Now, maybe 2025 is a completely clean bill of health, but I think you need to be prepared for the worst case scenario there.
Yeah, it's interesting. The question for me is, what's your long-term plan at third base? You've got Candelario under a contract for the next 2 years. when that contract is up, is CES your third baseman? I have to believe that Noelvi Marte is your hopeful third baseman at that point, right? So spending time putting CES at third base almost feels like a waste to me if that's not in your plans long term. Like if CES is your long-term first baseman and you're hoping that he turns into your future Joey Votto and your first baseman for a long time, and you have plans at third base, whether that's Noelvi Marte, whether that's a guy like Sal Stewart. I know they put Cam Collier over at first base this spring, but if it's Cam Collier, like you've got options there. So putting CES at first base feels unnecessary to me. But the other side of that story, obviously, is that if you think that you can compete in 2025, which I think we think that there's a chance for the Reds to get into the playoffs and compete this year, even if they're not going to be a favorites in the division or to win the World Series or anything, there's still a chance there for them to compete and get to the playoffs. Maybe it makes sense because you're trying to put your best team out there day in and day out this year to make the playoffs. But I think long-term, CES is at first base and you've got one of two or three other options at third base long-term. So for me, it doesn't necessarily make sense to waste time in any sort of like platoon at third base, especially with Candy being able to switch hit, but that's just me.
Well, we'll talk about Santiago Espinal's on in a little bit. I guess I could just go ahead and talk about him now. I do think he's the third baseman against left-handed pitching. I think he has the numbers to prove that. Hit a home run against a lefty today in Maryville, which kind of just a nice little thing to add to the point, which doesn't mean anything. But yeah, I think he hits lefties well enough to start and is pretty clearly, I think, your best defensive third baseman. So you just need the right-handed bat. Now, the one thing the Reds can kind of do here is be a little creative with this. So let's say they ultimately do go with Candelario as the third baseman and CES as the first baseman. What you could maybe do is you could spread those guys out a little bit in the lineup. And when you get when you get in like the eighth inning, if one of those guys just batted and you're going into the bottom of the eighth and they just batted the top half, you could pull whichever one just batted, move Candelario over to first base, or just put in Espinal for CES and swap, or what you get what I'm saying. You can be kind of creative with that and get Espinal into a lot of late games and not really hurt your offense. So I think that might be a big part of Santiago Espinal's role. But I do agree with you. I mean, long term, the door has to be opened for Noelvi Marte. It's clearly closed right now. When reports come out, he's on below Cooper Bowman on the depth chart. The door is certainly slammed for Noelvi Marte right now, but it will be open again soon. And I think I do think Candelario is the best solution right now, but I do think you have to be prepared. I think I don't mind them at all trying multiple options just to kind of see what they all look like. And what they end up at. But I think Candelario is a clear front runner right now at this point.
Yeah, and I think he should be. I mean, you signed him to a 3-year deal for a reason. Obviously, very clearly. I mean, you can look at him today playing much better shape this year. He is definitely slimmed down some. He obviously had the toe injury last year, which inhibited his ability to be mobile. So I think it's an interesting storyline to continue to watch. The value, of course, as we've talked about all offseason, is that this team has built incredible versatility, especially in the infield, and has many options depending on what's going to happen. So the one thing I can say with confidence, regardless of what lineup Tito decides to put out there, is that I feel good with multiple people at multiple positions on this infield for the Reds. And like you're saying, whether that's defensive replacements, whether that's offensive abilities, I feel like they have many options, and that's going to be a strength of this team going into the rest of the year.
And just to kind of how I see it right now, to kind of put a bow on this, against right-handed pitching right now, I think you would have Steer in left. You would have Lux probably as your DH. CES at first base, Candelario at third base. Now, they might mix in Max Lux, where they give Lux some starts at second base. They have McLain DH. They have Elly DH a day. Move McLain over to short. You get the point. Against lefties, I think you probably have either like Austin Hayes or someone else, an actual outfielder in left field. You put Steer as your DH, Candelario at first base, and then Espinal at third base. CES probably gets in there, but CES does have pretty significant reverse splits throughout, so I don't know if CES will play every day against right-handed pitching. Against left-handed pitching. But I think that's probably kind of how it shapes out right now, at least on February 22nd.
Yeah. Look, third base, obviously not the only competition ongoing. This starting rotation, quite frankly, is still yet to be ironed out. Graham Ashcraft gets the start in Maryville today against the Brewers. Obviously, we don't have a whole lot of info here, Nick, right? So we have to go kind of based on what we see. But 2 innings out of Ashcraft today. Any thoughts there?
I mean, look, solid numbers. I mean, good to see him come out. Wasn't the full Brewers A lineup. They did have like Jackson Churio, Bryce Terang, Mitchell, Joey Ortiz, but they were missing quite a few of their top players. But Graham Ashcraft's kind of a guy that's gotten forgotten about, at least in terms of a starting pitcher. Everyone just penciled him in as this guy that's going to turn into a great reliever. But when you have injury news or some speculation right now with Lauder and with Abbott, Graham Ashcraft could all of a sudden become a very, very, very important part of the Reds if you have another pitcher go down, for sure. So yeah, I fully on board with the Reds keeping Ashcraft as a starting pitcher for now. I don't think it's going to be too hard for him to transition from a starter to a reliever, especially if you use him in more of a bulk role as opposed to him trying to be a dominant one-inning reliever. So I think you got to keep your options open because, man, the starting pitching depth can evaporate very, very quickly. We've seen it happen with a lot of teams. We've seen it happen with the Reds. The Reds were pretty fortunate last year, but you don't get that every year. So, yeah, great start for Graham Ashcraft for sure.
Yeah. Well, speaking of starting pitching depth, 2 other young starting pitchers who are not likely to make the opening day roster, but nonetheless important pieces of depth as the Reds figure out what their depth chart looks like in 2025. And that's Connor Phillips and Chase Petty, both of which made appearances today. 4 innings between the 2 of them. Pretty good outings for both of them.
Yeah, we got to see Connor Phillips against the Guardians. Struck out Big Christmas, the postseason hero for the Guardians. Struck him out looking. Thought he would have got another strikeout if they were using ABS.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought Phillips looked really good. Walked 2 guys, but his command was not. It was not the Connor Phillips command that we saw at times last year. It was pretty decent for him. And yeah, Chase Petty. I mean, 2 really good outings against the Brewers. I think there's a good chance we'll see both of those guys at some point. How long just depends on how healthy the rest of the rotation sits. But it's nice to have both of those guys at Louisville right now to start the season. Phillips is more of a wild card. I feel like Petty's still more of a, your traditional prospect, but both guys are definitely talented enough. There's no question about that to be big league starters.
Yeah. Look, I mean, we've said it before, but hard to imagine a AAA rotation much better than what this Reds team is likely to tout at the start of 2025. I mean, when you look at the projected top of the rotation at AAA, and I'm just pulling it up real quick. Rhett Lauder, Carson Spires, Connor Phillips, Chase Petty, Leon Richardson, all expected to compete for spots there. Obviously, you've got Wade Miley also waiting in the wings. Once his injury clears up, we don't know what to expect out of Chase Burns, whether he starts at AA or somewhere else. So definitely a strength right now, or so it seems, of the Reds will be that starting pitching depth. So many different guys with major league experience already. And some of the guys obviously at the top of the rotation who have shown to be really, really solid starting pitchers for this Reds lineup. Nick, what else what else stood out to you today, game day number 1, Red spring training?
Yeah, Ian Jabot looked really good. Velocity was up, I think, about 1.5 miles. So it's great to see. I mean, Ian Jabot was a really, really good pitcher in 2023 for the Reds. Last year, just everything that could went wrong for him. So he's kind of a wild card. I don't really know what to expect, but day 1 looked really good. It would be great to see him look good. If he looks good in spring training, he deserves a roster spot. I just don't really know where he's at. So that was great to see. Taylor Rogers struck out a couple guys. That was good to see as well. He gave a couple hits, but pretty strong debut from him. Noelvi Marte got the start at third base. I know we talked about how he's clearly out of the Reds' graces at this point, but he walked in his very first plate appearances. Why was that significant? Well, Craig, last year in 292 plate appearances between AAA and the big leagues, he walked a total of 9 times. So great to see Noelvi Marte get a walk. Hopefully that was I don't know, maybe it was 4 pitches, nowhere close to strike zone. I wasn't watching. But nonetheless, that's great to see. We already talked about Candelario making that really nice play. But yeah, that was kind of my my other notes. Yasver Zulueta and Leon Richardson, they looked rough.
Yeah.
2 guys who are clearly on the outside of the Reds graces right now, but
Lion kind of seems like one of those guys that'll be DFA'd.
I would love to know where Leon Richardson stands within the Reds organization, because this was a guy that in 2023, where was a guy that before he had Tommy John surgery was one of the top prospects. As Tommy John surgery, everyone forgot about him. 2023, he had an incredible year in the minor leagues. I think he started in Daytona, got all the way up to the big leagues. Last year was just a pretty miserable year. I don't know. There's some prospect rankings that still have him way higher than I would, which kind of surprised me. I don't know if it's just a matter of when you get to that level, you kind of stay there. So I don't know. I don't know where Leon Richardson stands with the Reds. That would be, if you were asking me, like, if I could get a actual opinion from Reds people, a legit opinion, he would be probably one of the top 5 guys I would want to know about.
It's just interesting. I just don't eventually this team is expected to need spots on the 40-man roster. And there's some guys who probably won't make the opening day roster. That'll be easy cuts from there. Some potentially some veteran guys, whatever it is. But if you look up and down in terms of guys that are going to be candidates for DFAing, Zulueta certainly seems like one of the names that stands out, and the other one to me is Leon Richardson. But I don't know. It'll be interesting to see kind of how they manage that as the season goes on. Because you look at the rest of the up and down. I mean, Carson Spires, I don't think is going to go anywhere. Santillan seems to be a major league guy. Connor Phillips, if he can throw strikes, I think is a major league guy, and they have a lot of faith in him. Luis May, they just put on the 40-man roster. He's one of the top prospects. He's not going anywhere. Rhett Lauder's not going anywhere. Maybe, I mean, they just signed Scott Barlow, so hard to imagine moving from him. So it's just a question of
$2.5 million.
And they're paying him $2.5 million, so they're not going to DFA him early. Maybe he's a June kind of guy that gets cut if they're looking to bring somebody up. But you look at the 40-man, there's just not a whole lot of fat to be cut, in my personal opinion. But like you said, I don't really know how the Reds view some of these guys behind the scenes.
Well, Williamson can still be added to this. Will be added.
Who will be added to 60-day? Yep.
IL at some point. I'm assuming they're just keeping him there. I don't really know why they're keeping him there. I don't know the explanation there, but he clearly will at some point. But yeah, I mean, you bring up a good point. There's not a whole lot pitching wise. Those 2 guys are certainly up at the top. Our good friend Jacob Hurtubise probably is up there as well. Stuart Fairchild, it feels like he's probably gonna make the team right now, which I don't know. I don't know if that's just a feeling, but it felt like at the end of the year last year, it felt like Stuart Fairchild might not survive the offseason. But I don't know. It feels like the way that the Reds have touted him out, and feels like he probably is. But yeah, I mean, other than that, there's really not a whole lot more. Obviously, unfortunately, there's the the possibility that someone has a significant injury in spring training, and then they can be moved to the 60-day IL and these problems resolve itself. Hopefully that's certainly not the case, though.
Yeah, we'll see. I wanted to bring up one other thing. Our friend Bryce Spalding tweeted this out, and I think that of all people, you're going to love it. But at one point, the Reds lineup in Maryville today consisted of the following Reds top prospects. Cam Collier was at third, Edwin Arroyo at shortstop, Tyler Callahan at second base, Hector Rodriguez was in right field, and Ethan O'Donnell was in center field. That's certainly a lineup that I know gets Nick Kirby excited.
It's almost the whole Dayton Dragons playoff lineup from last year, except for Edwin Arroyo. That's exciting. The lineups today were exciting. I mean, both squads. It was cool that the Reds filled out 2 split squad lineups today, and you looked at it really up and down, and you're like, every player on both lineups are at least fringe big leaguers. Like that's pretty cool. I do think the Reds have some really good depth. They don't have 4 or 5 studs. They have Elly De La Cruz and some guys that we think can maybe become studs, but then they have a lot of guys that are just good, solid baseball players. And you hope that's what can really carry this team, is that depth, because the Reds are not going to have the best 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in Major League Baseball. They're not going to have the best in the division, but 1 through 9, could the Reds have the best in the division? Maybe. I mean, the Cubs are really good, but the Cubs still have some question marks in terms of some guys that, how much can they produce? That's the big question. Is can the Reds 1 through 9 have the best lineup in the division?
Well, yeah, I mean, they're going to have, I don't know about in the division. They'll have to be competing obviously with the Cubs for that. But yeah, I mean, top to bottom, they're going to have a talented lineup, no doubt, but we'll see kind of how it plays out. A couple other topics, I guess I want to get your thoughts on, not necessarily Reds related, but nonetheless, first game action view of ABS. Guardians used it twice today. First one was unsuccessful. Second one was successful, if I remember correctly. I know that they can't, but like, I'm ready for that to be in the majors like tomorrow.
Yeah, it's disgusting that we have to watch this in spring training and then it goes away. Like, why? I got to be honest, Craig. I didn't really see the ABS because I was, like I said, I was trying to listen to the game, and then I had the game on the TV, so I wasn't like locked into that side of it. But yeah, it is going to be a major bummer when ABS goes away. It's just going to, like, after you see it all spring and then you get the second game of the year and there's just a miserable call at a brutal spot. Like, what are we doing?
Luckily, Angel Hernandez has officially retired, so maybe it won't be used as much as it would be otherwise. But nonetheless, it definitely an interesting wrinkle to the game. Not only just obviously we want to get every call right, and we don't want umpires to decide games, which unfortunately has happened too much. But I also am wondering the philosophy and the strategy behind team using it, and whether that's, I think what they said on the broadcast today was that the Guardians are giving players just full reign to make those decisions on their own. Will other teams have some sort of system to identify when it's appropriate or not? Is it going to be situational in terms of when it's willing to be used? But nonetheless, I mean, for me personally, like, if it was up to me, it would be in the majors on opening day in 2025. More likely than not, Nick, and you can correct me if you think differently. I do think that opening day 2026 ABS will be part of Major League Baseball.
Yeah, I do think, as much as I kind of want to see it used, just out of curiosity, I do think Terry Francona telling them to not participate is probably smart, because I do think it could mess people up. I don't think it's gonna like ruin it, or I don't want to go like overboard on that. But I don't think there's any benefit really to these players experimenting. If you're the Reds, make the other teams be the guinea pigs on it and see how it works. And they can, put their surveys into Major League Baseball if they liked it or not. Let's not mess with anything. So I do think that's probably the best approach.
Yeah, I don't know that it really values the major leaguers a whole lot this year to be worried about it. The only potential positive, obviously, is trying to hone their vision and understanding the zone, but every umpire calls it differently. So, like, what's the point, right? I think ultimately in 2026 spring training, with the expectation that it is in the majors in 2026, certainly I would encourage them to use it and use it often. I also think that when we do get that, Elly De La Cruz's value is going to skyrocket even more, because he showed a really good eye in 2024, at least seemingly based on the TV broadcasts. And there was some data out there that certainly seemed to indicate that he was on the wrong side of a number of calls that resulted in him striking out. So it'd be interesting to see Elly De La Cruz specifically with an ABS, similar to a guy like Aaron Judge, who oftentimes gets, less than favorable calls just due to their height and the size of their zone. So interesting to see. One other note, just real quick, wanted to touch on and get your thoughts on, and that's the rumored trade of Nolan Arenado, is a name that's been thrown around literally all off season as a trade candidate. Latest trade rumors with Arenado is now involving the Astros.
Yeah, it was surprising that the Cardinals stopped or whatever, and maybe that was just a straight up a bargaining thing for them, or a positioning stance from them. But you look at a guy like Nolan Arenado, who has the potential to fall off a cliff. Like, if you're the Cardinals, I don't think you want to risk that he has a bad first half, because if you get to the trade deadline and he has a bad first half after back-to-back seasons where he was just a slightly above average hitter, you're really going to have a hard time. Well, you're already not going to get anything, but you're going to have to eat even more of his salary. So it would be a good thing for the Reds. I mean, I clearly think that he's still going to be better than whatever option that they have, and especially in the short term. So it's a pretty interesting thing. And, I talked earlier in the offseason about how, and I don't know how much people agree with it or not, but how bad the Cardinals are is one of the biggest keys to the Reds this year. Because looked at the AL Central last year, there was 3 teams that made the playoffs, and 2 of those teams, the only reason they made the playoffs were because they played the Chicago White Sox 13 times. You take away the White Sox, neither one of them are playoff teams. So if the Cardinals are not just bad, but atrocious, really helps the Reds. Losing Nolan Arenado certainly doesn't make a drastic shift, but it puts them closer to the really awful, at least the potential to be really awful. It's interesting, Craig, how different their betting odds are versus their PECOTA projections. Like, it is like 7 wins off, I think.
I don't know. I know it's not to the same level, but the Cardinals just always seem to find a way to be better than expected. And it seems like it's been going on for a long time. And, even when they do make moves and you're like, all right, well, this is finally the time where they take a step back and they retool and replenish. So certainly not to the level of the Brewers and how they unfathomably continue to reload, but I don't know their depth chart well enough to know who comes in to replace Arenado if they trade him away. I don't know if you know that off the top of your head. But it'll be interesting to watch. I don't know what really a package would look like for Arenado at this point in his career, at this point of his contract. I mean, he's projected to be their starting third baseman, and Thomas Sajaci is kind of their only infield depth piece right now. If you look at their depth chart on Fangraphs at AAA, Cesar Prieto and Jacob Bookberger. Prieto is a non-roster invitee, so maybe he's the guy, but I don't know.
We had a commenter nailed it. Yeah, Robo Buck If Arenado gets flipped to be a third base by committee, yeah, that's what they would do. But then you're taking guys out of spots that they're currently in to lesser. So yeah, it would, no question, be a benefit to the Reds, at least in some degree for sure. So it'll just be something fascinating to watch. It's something that I think does have a pretty big, somewhat of an impact on the Reds, and just kind of a fascinating thing to watch. And I think it's just really, it's not about like return. It's about how much are the Astros going to eat of that? Are the Astros going to take on of that salary, and how much do the Cardinals have to eat? That's really the positioning. I mean, there's a possibility that you hold on to him. Like, I know I talked about Luis Robert, who I feel like is in a lot different spot because he's more of an injury guy. But like, there is an argument to say, well, we hold on to Nolan Arenado. We hope and pray that he has a monster first half of the season, and then we can get a team to pay almost his whole salary, just because you can't get a player like Nolan Arenado at the trade deadline. You can't sign him, that's for sure. So, but I don't know. I have a hard time believing the Cardinals are going to take that kind of risk. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, the thing about it is that, Arenado's going to be 34 years old this year. Is going to be 34 years old this year. Not super old, but certainly not in his prime anymore. And he's got 3 more years on that contract. Scheduled to make $21 million this year, $16 million next year, and then $15 million in the final year of the deal. That's the annual payroll piece, not the cash and the cumulative. So the question becomes, okay, if you're the Cardinals, obviously nothing this year because it's probably too late, but what do you do with that cash for the next 2 years, and where do you reallocate that to kind of retool and replenish? And certainly be interesting to see if they have to eat any of that salary in order to move him. You'd have to believe that they'd have to eat some of it, but I don't know exactly what that looks like. But look, Nick, we've been live for, I don't know, for a while, and 175-ish people watching for the most part for most of the show, and a spring training game. We first of all appreciate you all, love you all. Ricky Logan with a $5 super chat. Like I needed a reason to get hyped. Let's go Reds. Ricky, we appreciate you as always. But real quick, for the benefit of those people that are watching, and for those people that are listening, either Saturday evening or Sunday morning, want to take a minute and kind of go over the plans for the rest of the spring training. Obviously, during the year, during the regular season, Nick, myself, Trace, maybe others will be tag teaming and be live after every single game, as we always are. But for spring training, Nick, why don't you fill the people in on the plan for the year?
Yeah, for those who have been around, that nothing's going to change with spring training, but I know there's probably a lot of new listeners that maybe joined us at some point during the season last year. So we will do audio-only podcasts after every single spring training game. So by the time you wake up, unless you have to get up at like 3 o'clock in the morning, sometimes I don't get these posted until like 4. But by like 4 a.m., you'll have a podcast in your feed, basically recapping the game. During the ones that get posted on the weekdays, I try as much as possible to get an interview as well. So I kind of recap the game, and then I'll talk with maybe a Reds writer or reporter, or someone else interesting like Bryce or Mitch or someone like that, or Clay. So that'll be every single day. So make sure you subscribe to Chatterbox Reds wherever you get your podcast. When I do interviews with someone like Mitch, I'll try to post those onto the YouTube channel as well. But I'm not going to post the YouTube videos just running through the recap of every spring training game. That'll be audio only. So again, make sure you subscribe to Chatterbox Reds wherever you get your podcast. If you could, I know we've asked for this a lot. So I know there's a lot of people that already have, and thank you so much to those who have. But if you haven't, leave us a 5-star review wherever you do listen to your podcast. That really does help us out with all the metrics and that. So it doesn't have to be anything great. Just, Nick Kirby's handsome, 5 stars. That's perfect. That's all you have to do. And then move along. But appreciate you. And yeah, like I said, we'll try to get as much videos as we can. If there's any big breaking news where we need more of a discussion, I'll bring on Craig a lot of times. and we'll just post something up on YouTube for that. So we'll still have some YouTube videos, but that'll be more sporadic. Also, we'll try to do a couple live shows during spring training. I got to kind of look at the schedule. Maybe there's like a game that's like an 8 o'clock game or 9 o'clock game. Do a live show in the 9th inning after that. Those of us who have kids, it's a lot easier to do that. So we'll do some live stuff, not a whole lot. But then, once we get into the regular season, you'll have our faces on your feed every single night.
Can't wait. And one more quick shameless plug, I guess. If you are in a marketing role or own a business and are interested in supporting Chatterbox Sports, we do have a few sponsorship openings for the 2025 year. And Nick or I would be happy to chat with you. Just shoot us a DM on x.com or wherever is most convenient for you, and let us know that you're interested in chatting. And we definitely appreciate the support. If you have that opportunity, we would appreciate it. If you don't, we appreciate you tuning in still. Nonetheless, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. And we look forward to doing this 162 times during the regular season, plus maybe a couple during the postseason too. For Nick Kirby, I'm Craig Sandlin. This has been the premiere edition of Spring Training Reds postseason baseball for 2025. We appreciate you all. For Chatterbox Reds, we'll see you next time. Go Reds.